This episode is brought to you by Adobe Acrobat. So here's something I've been thinking about. We spend so much time creating documents, reports, research, press kits, briefings, and then we just attach them to an email and hope someone reads them. That's not a workflow problem. That's a communication problem. Adobe's new productivity agent in Acrobat is built to fix exactly that. It can take your documents and turn them into actual experiences. AI-powered workspaces called PDF spaces, where you can combine files, links, and notes to do research, surface insights, and create content that people actually can explore and interact with. And you can customize how the AI guides readers through it, too, adding your branding and seeing who actually engaged with it. Vice News is already using this for on-the-ground reporting and cross-platform content. Kid Cudi uses it for his podcast prep. And honestly, this one makes total sense. Celebrity event planner Mindy Weiss uses it to package her expertise for clients. The idea is simple. Stop sending files. Start sharing experiences. Check it out at adobe.com/acrobat. Hi, welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast about how AI is changing media, news, and communication. I'm your host, Pete Pachal. I covered tech for a long time as a journalist, and now I talk with the media leaders, the builders, and the creators, all trying to answer the question, how will we get information in the future? And how will that transform journalism and the business of media? Quick note, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review, maybe a nice comment. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. Those things really do help more people find the show. This week, we're talking about one of the biggest unresolved questions in media and AI, which is if AI systems are going to use publisher content to answer people's questions, what does a real marketplace for that content look like? Because the uncomfortable answer may be that the marketplace already exists. It just doesn't include publishers. A growing network of scraping companies and data brokers and AI infrastructure players is helping companies access the web at scale. And some of that is powering AI search, RAG systems, and even enterprise research tools. Now, publishers are trying to stop some of it, maybe use some of it, and certainly get paid for more of it. My guest this week is Jonathan Woahn, co-founder and CXO of Cashmere. Cashmere is a company building infrastructure for premium publishers to manage and license and protect and monetize their content in AI systems. Cashmere has worked around deals involving publishers and content providers like Wiley and AI platforms like Perplexity. And Jonathan's been thinking deeply about this and the difference between a scraper-driven market and a legitimate content marketplace. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the scraper economy, why publishers may be losing what little leverage they have, what it could take to build a cleaner, licensed market, and whether the future of media depends less on blocking bots or more on building just good pipes. Jonathan Woahn, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Pete, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So before we get into all that, big, heady topics I was just describing there, I'd love to learn just like a little bit more about you and your background and how you came to be connected to this, the business of connections, which is connecting like publishers to good marketplaces. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm excited to be here, Pete. So my background, I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is the 5th company that I've actually started or has been early member of. And in the previous company that I was at, it was called Book Club. And what we were doing at Book Club is we were working with publishers and authors to create professional development programs. And we started out doing these bespoke, manually. It was very time intensive. It was very expensive. And when AI and ChatGPT came around, we saw, we could actually use AI to create very custom and very bespoke professional development programs. And so we started trying to do that. And we ran into 2 big problems. We found, first of all, the process of actually licensing the content was extremely time consuming and difficult. And then the second was, even once we were able to license it, the structure of the data that we got itself was very difficult for AI to work with. And the anecdote that I use with people is, we would create, a program around 7 habits of highly effective people. And early days, the AI would create the 26 habits of highly effective people. Like it just didn't know how to like kind of pull the information out of the content, right? And so we just looked at this and said, you know, AI is not going anywhere. Premium content publishers need better rails to be able to interface and interact with AI. And we've had to build a lot of technology to understand, you know, how to make this work and how to facilitate it and how to get AI to work well with it. And so we ended up launching Cashmere to be that infrastructure to help support publishers and making it so their content could be used with AI.
Yeah, like what you mentioned there really resonates. It's like the frustrating thing when you get into these AI systems and you expect it to do something semi-deterministic, like surely you can adhere to a character count in the same way, like surely you know what the number 7 is. And it kind of doesn't, like it kind of does and kind of doesn't. Now, to be fair, I think we're both kind of talking about AI circa 2024, 2023, probably. And
Yeah,
the
2022.
systems that
Yeah,
that we use today are
much better.
better at this.
100%.
But still, it really hammers home that these AI interpretation alone is not like the thing you should be 100% reliant on, right? Like in terms of like cleaning data and putting guardrails, whether they are within prompts or in the systems itself, just has to be a part of this process or it's just not
Correct.
going to be reliable.
Yeah, yeah. Especially as the publisher, like if you're wanting the AI to represent the content in the way that you want it to be represented, it, definitely, yeah.
You
It's
got to
still,
have a voice here, and that voice requires some knowledge about your data and
yep,
treating yourself like a data company in many ways,
yep,
right?
100%. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Cool. So honestly, I'd love to just get right into it, like the serious stuff I was talking about at the beginning. So like I know you're on LinkedIn and you're writing about things going on, and there's some good research out there from Matthew Goldstein. And we were writing about how the AI content marketplace is like already there, but just like the publishers are barely a part of it. Like it's not like they're not there, but it's like something like a 1.6 billion, I forget what the exact numbers are, versus something that is like less than a tenth of that size in terms of the actual licensing money sort of being exchanged. So it's like 14-1, I think was the ratio you mentioned in terms of like the
Yeah,
actual, that was the size of the market versus like the cut publishers are actually getting in this market. So tell us like what's going on. How did this happen? How did we get here where there's like just mass scraping of content that's being sold at scale and publishers are just like, I wouldn't even say they're like barely keeping up. They're like drowning in this.
totally. And it's interesting. Since then, the number is actually even worse. It's actually 20-1,
Wow.
based off some of the more recent information that we've looked at. Um, I mean, look, Pete, uh, we've all grown up in this world that Google has kind of curated for us for the last, 25, 30 years, where it's like we've been like, we've reached some degree of equilibrium where, we've been comfortable with playing Google's game on SEO and trying to figure out how to get content, how to get it ranked and how to get it discovered. And one of the things that has happened with the advent of AI has been the democratization of search.
Mm.
And so like what I mean by that is, you know, I mean, Google is the default place that we would all go to search and look for information. I mean, it was just kind of like the first stop.
Right.
And now what has happened is, now we've got ChatGPT, we've got Gemini, we've got Copilot, we've got Claude, we've got Perplexity, we've got and some of these platforms are building their own indexes and they're scraping the internet on their own and building their own index so that they can serve their own platform. But what is happening more and more is that, as you and I are standing up, Cloud Copilot or standing up our own agents to help with our own research or things that we're doing on our own machines, like they need access to content. They need
Mm-hmm.
access to the internet. And so what has happened as a result of this is, you know, you used to be able to use Google's API for search, Bing's API for search. They have both since, to my knowledge, shut both of them down. I remember when Bing did it 2 years ago, it was like this big deal. It was like they saw that this competitive asset that they had built, this internet scale index, they're like, we're not going to make this available for everyone. We need to use this internally. But
Mm.
then what that created was this huge vacuum for a lot of other players to come in and to start scraping the internet and to start building their own indices and to start selling, the work that they're doing. Because, I mean, candidly, building a great crawler and building a great index, it's not an easy problem to solve, and it's not a
Mm,
cheap problem to solve. It's very technically complicated and it's very expensive.
mm.
Um, and so there are definitely opportunities for like economies of scale to come in and for some of these crawling and scraping platforms to be able to provide solutions. And agents need access to that internet, that content. And so what's happening now is you're starting to see a lot of these guys that are popping up and selling content. And there's like this race to the bottom on pricing because they're trying to figure out how do we get, you know, how do we get as many agents using our search as possible. But the thing that they are not doing is they are not licensing that content from the publishers that are scraping it from, and they are not sharing revenue with anybody.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're really zeroing in on like kind of like the sore spot here. It's really more of a vacuum of I don't know if it's law or best practices or a few other things, but the way the internet evolved, this indexing, this active indexing was treated as, very benign in the sense that you have an index and that's just going to help people find your content online. And that was
yep.
all anyone ever thought that was ever going to be used for. And now, obviously that still is part of it, but now with this content layer, this interpretive layer of AI put on top of it, that is owned and operated by these players that aren't publishers, it's suddenly that bargain is gone, right? But the
Correct.
infrastructure still exists, and it's sort of like treated as almost like a given that, oh yeah, indexing, let's just do indexing. But it it's less about what the infrastructure and more about, quote unquote, the outputs. Whereas in the old days it was like links, and now it's actual content. And this is where, like, obviously where the contention is,
Yeah.
and nothing's really been decided. It feels like, as much as what you can what you can and can't do. So everyone just defaults to whatever they can do.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
should.
Yeah. I mean, there was a social contract between Google and every website where it was like, I'm going to scrape your content and I'm going to show blue links and I'm going to redirect traffic. We're going to get people to your site. Right. And these days, I mean, there is no contract. A lot of these scrapers are just scraping the content and they are serving it up directly to the agents.
Mm.
And they may include the source link, they might not, but there's nothing that, effectively demands that the agentic interface or like where it's using or referencing any of that content for inference. There's nothing that says that they have to point back to the source or that they have to redirect people. So a lot of that social contract has just been totally upended through a lot of the way that the agents are accessing, these indexes right now.
So I know the report that we're talking about from Matthew Goldstein, which is great. It's been sort of going around, but it makes a distinction between like training and grounding. Does that distinction matter that much to publishers?
Uh, well,
I guess we should define those terms.
yeah,
So
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You're the expert, dude.
Yes. The shorter answer is yes. Publishers should absolutely care about the difference between inference and training, or grounding and training, are kind of like the
Right.
two.
Sure.
People familiar with those. So, training. The analogy that I've used in the past is like training is like as a student, you're going to school, you're learning your field of trade, an engineer, right? You go, you're
Mm.
learning how the equations and how they work. You're paying to be there. But at some point, and that's like training of the model. You're giving it
Yeah.
all the information and learns how to do what it's going to do, right? Inference is like, and grounding is like when you're actually applying the skills. So now as an engineer, you graduate and then you go out and it's like, okay, they're going to hire me to build this machine. Now you're actually applying what you've learned. And that's like what inference does with these models, right? Is like
Right.
now they're taking all the things that they've learned and like using it to generate output tokens back to, respond to whatever the user request is. And in the world of publishing,
Mhm.
there are a lot of reasons why we need to understand the difference between these two, and why it's really important monetarily to grok the difference. On the
Mm.
training side, these are the majority of. Rob Kelly has tracked a lot of this stuff around the training deals that have been taking place and the different deals between publishers, and a lot of the announced deals have largely been for training deals. And so,
Right.
from a publisher perspective, it's pretty easy because you just package your stuff, send it over, and you're getting paid, right? Like you just align on like what those terms are, and now you can start making money from training. Um, And, you know, the big question around training is like, you know, where does this land from a copyright perspective? Like, is this transformative? Is this something that's going to be permitted or not? Right. And like the
Mm,
courts are starting to get some kind of clarity around that. The one that is very not clear right now is inference.
mm,
And, you know, my perspective on this is one of the things I was talking with some publishers about yesterday was it's like, you know, whether training comes down on the side of, you know, copyright infringement or not, like, I don't know that it totally matters a lot just
yeah.
because the financial opportunity around inference is so much greater than I believe that the opportunity around training is.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just to redefine so that everyone knows, like inference is like accessing stuff in the real time stuff because training takes a long time. It's very compute intensive. I don't know. It's like, I don't know, every few months or so the models are retrained or something, maybe even longer than that.
Yeah.
Obviously it's still an important issue, but it's like accessing like the news that happened today or even an
Yes.
hour ago. That's the opportunity because people want that information. I mean, you know, there's a whole it's called the media industry. It's based around
Right.
this. You need current information, often up to the second if you're talking about market movements.
That's exactly
Um,
right. And
yeah,
you can't train it on that stuff. It has to happen all
yeah.
at runtime. It has to be at grounding. And Pete, it's beyond just like the currency of this, right? But there's also just like the historic record. And
Mm,
so, you know, for media publishers, it is going to be about like what are the breaking stories, what's happening right now. And for say like an academic publisher, like the academic record is perpetually changing and we're learning things that change over time. And so publishers need to have the ability to say, here's what I want available, here's what I want discoverable, here's what I want in the public record versus like, oh, this is no longer relevant. We need to be able to retract this. We need to be able to pull this out. And you cannot do that
mhm.
from a training perspective. You sell your content, it's baked into the soup, baked into the
Right.
cake, right?
Snippets don't matter so much
Right.
on the that they're training, but this is it's a really good point. And I do think do you feel there's like I think early on there was too much focus on the training because there just wasn't a lot of inference, at least in terms of outputs.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot in terms of like all the big AIs have some kind of search connected to them, and there's a lot of like third party systems, legit and shady, shall we say, involved. So how much has that the damage is probably overstating it, but is there's kind of a bit of a distraction on training in that not that that's been resolved, but is its relevance is to what's actually going to like be a sustainable future seems minimal as what we're talking about. And is that causing a sort of an education problem among publishers almost?
I I do think so. Um, you know, the dollars I was just in with a publisher earlier this week and they were just talking about the impact of some of the training deals they've done on their, you know, their budget for the year.
Hmm,
And the training deals are some of the things that have kind of helped to kind of close the gap on the work that they're doing.
interesting.
And so it's like they look at these and see like there is real dollars here and it is making a real impact to their top and to their bottom line. Um, but it is episodic, it's not predictable, and it doesn't training the training market doesn't have the signals of like a scalable, sustainable market, right? Like it's just it's harder to see. But I think that has and it does distract from like the inference based opportunities. And candidly, like I think a lot of these scraper platforms are part of the reason why it's getting distracted is because they're not seeing the dollars because those dollars are being diverted to other companies that are not the publishers themselves.
Is this a part of like why a lot of it feels like the deals have kind of dried up? Like there was a bunch for a while there, and a good deal of them were OpenAI, although some of the other ones weren't necessarily as public. So again, I guess I'm asking you in terms of what you're hearing because you're probably talking to tons of people all the time. But I do feel like the deals have gotten fewer and farther between. And I think that maybe that's partly a demand issue, if you know what I mean. So in the sense of like, we've been talking about these sort of scraper companies that have risen up in the last year and a half, 2 years, and they're in this legal gray area certainly, but it's rather than making a deal with a publisher, like maybe you could just go over there and it's to this sort of gray market and
Get
get
access.
your stuff. And at the same time, as we were just talking about, maybe the training data itself has also been devalued a bit, regardless of where you're going for it. So it's kind of like a mix of those things. Has that caused like less demand on that side? But basically, my core question is why have the deals kind of dried up? Assuming that's what you're hearing too.
Um, well, I think the training deals are still happening.
Okay.
I know they're still happening. I mean, we talk to publishers all the time. They talk about the deals that they're doing right now. They're smaller. They're not as big dollar. It seems like they tend to be very kind of like topically focused.
Okay.
So it's like we're building an agent that is focused on, you know, medical research, and so we're looking for, you know, journals that kind of address this particular domain, right? So it's not. I feel like we're definitely seeing a lot less of like the big headline ones that we've seen over the last couple of years, but
Right.
they're still happening. They're definitely still happening. It's just I think they're smaller and more targeted, and people just aren't being noisy about it like they were in the early days.
Yeah, maybe it's just not as much of a news event too. I guess there's sort of a on the news side of it. Once you land on the moon once, it's like everything becomes a little rote.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to tie this back to sort of what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Because we started out talking about good licensing rails and clean data and having publisher defined systems for playing nice with legit operators. And because a lot of these gray market companies are presumably doing this. I think it was even in Matthew's research. He's sort of like, it can be messy, right? You got to get past paywalls, and there's weird stuff when you're scraping that gets hoovered up as well. And,
Yeah.
just generally it's not that reliable or as reliable as something that is more legit. Does that provide some hope? You know what I mean? Is that like an opening that like better data, cleaner systems, that's going to be like, with publisher MCPs and stuff like that, that's just the demand for that's going to naturally rise? Or I don't know, maybe that's a little too hopeful.
Well, I, um, let me see. I'm trying to think of like how to best answer this question because there's like some assumptions that we're kind of building on that I kind of like. I think we
Sure.
need to take a
Take them
step
apart.
kind of question here, which is like one of the questions is like, why are these platforms growing? And like, what is it that people are using them for? And like, part of it is just because the incumbent alternatives have closed their doors. And so now there's opportunity, right? But we've started talking with a number of people on the buy side and people who are looking to get access to content legitimately. Like they recognize that, like, candidly, there is some risk that is associated with getting content through some of the gray, the gray platforms. And so there are people who are looking to get legitimate access. And part of the challenge that they face right now is just like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get access to it? I think there's this opportunity right now to raise awareness around like the source of where your content's coming from, and is it legitimate, and is it creating a sustainable market? And so like, just as an example, or an analogy, 20 years ago, going to the grocery store was you just like, I just got to make sure I have food to put on the table. Like I don't really care where it comes from. I just need food, right? And what's been, I think, very positive is in the last, 10 years is people have become much more conscious of like, where's my food coming from? Is it organic? How is it grown? Which is this a Georgia peach or is this like a California peach? It's like people care a lot more about this. And I think that's a good thing.
I was just going to say, like, there's I don't know if it's a sophistication that's created by supply side, like just having like a lot of supply. I don't know. I'm not a market genius, but you tell me, like, is this an indicator of like an evolving market? And I guess
Yes.
that's what my question had to do with, like,
Yes.
how is this going to evolve as informational systems get more sophisticated?
And I think that's my point here is like, I think people
Yeah.
need to start thinking about like the term I've used is ethically sourced data. Like, is this
All right.
content that I'm working with ethically
Good term.
sourced? And is it sustainable? And like, if I'm buying content from a scraper, like, and it's not going back to the publisher, how in the world is that publisher even going to be able to continue to create content? Because if the publisher can't create content, the scraper has nobody to scrape from, and then they have nothing to buy from. And so I think the first step is like, there's got to be this awareness on the buy side, particularly around like, where's my content coming from? And like, how is this creating a sustainable ecosystem? Um, because I think as that awareness rises, then the question starts to become, okay, well, let's assume that I actually want to get my content ethically and I want to get ethically sourced data. Where do I go to do that? And there's not a lot of options at this point in how to go about doing that.
Well,
And I
that brings me to like what Cashmere does, right? So, can you give me a little bit more on like exactly what your role is in creating? As like, are you someone who cleans up data, creates systems, creates a marketplace? Like, what is Cashmere's role in all that?
Yeah. So our role where we started was um, ingesting publisher content, getting it ready for AI, structuring it in a way that like the AI can now know what the 7 habits are instead of 27 habits, um, and helping to get publisher content cleaned up and ready for use with AI. Right? It's
Okay.
messy. We help clean it up. So that's the first part. Now, once it's in place like that, the second piece was how do you manage, deployment of that content? How do you get people access to it? How do you help them get visibility to it? How do you manage security, authentication, entitlements? Like, there's a lot of kind of moving pieces to like, how do you make that content actually, you know, be consumable? And so, what we've done is we've built all the infrastructure pieces to help connect publisher content with agentic systems.
Hmm.
Um, and so our focus has historically just been on like just building that infrastructure and then helping our publishing partners pursue the AI opportunities they want to pursue. Uh, what has been interesting though is as our publisher base has continued to grow, as we've started to get more contact, more use cases, more applications, as we've started to get a lot more inbound interest from people who are looking to ethically source their content and their
So
data
on the buy side.
on the buy side.
Hmm.
And so we hadn't done a lot of work on this side because we've been very focused on supporting the publishers. Um, but now, as these opportunities are starting to come in, we are starting to think about, well, what can we do to help facilitate and expedite getting access for these applications to getting these applications access to ethically sourced content. So
Hmm.
we've started to do a lot more work on this front, and we've got I don't know, 15 of these opportunities that we're running right now. I mean, it's been really fun, to be honest.
And it's kind of like you're learning a lot and doing these kind of, I would imagine, uh, content to content buyer sort of handshakes, I guess, from a technical and commercial as- aspect. And at what point does that become a marketplace, or does this become something that is scalable? Like, is that the vision? Maybe it's a little too early to tell on your side, since this isn't quite the direction you thought you were going. But and if that is the case, like who do you end up competing with in that space? Because it's,
Yeah.
like, as I know, other companies have sort of tried this, but they're all sort of, no one's done it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, Pete, starting a marketplace is really, really hard.
Hmm.
And you've got to like, I mean, I think there's a marketing component to it. There's a technical component to it. There's a lot of luck. I think that sits like being in the right place at the right time with the right people. And so like, I think there's a version or a future where like what we're doing with Cashmere, I think it could become a marketplace. Um, but at the moment, what it feels more like we're doing at like this very instant is it feels more like we're like brokering relationships, right? Like
Right.
we're initially just taking like we've got this super powerful platform, this super powerful technology that sits under the hood of what we've built, and now we're just trying to help like we're trying to help publishers monetize their content. Like that
Mm.
is like our goal, right? Um, and if we can help do that by saying, hey, we've got people who want your content. And what's great is now we've got, we have someone that comes to us and says, as an example, we were talking to a South Korean hardware manufacturer not South Korean, South Asia hardware manufacturer who has like a Siri competitor. And they're looking for access at inference time to news content. And they're looking for kind of like, some kind of lifestyle type content. And so we've got a handful of publishers who we're working with who do this. And so now what we can say is like, well, publisher, we were working on this other thing with you to start with, but now we've had someone coming asking us for this. Is this something you would be interested in getting involved in? And so now like we're able to start taking this network of publishers that we have and start bringing them together to bring that content into these application side. So it
Hmm.
does feel a lot more like brokering arrangements right now than like a marketplace. But you
Yeah.
know, maybe at some point it could turn into that. But that's not like what we set out to build
Right.
at the moment.
Yeah. The future's long.
The future is long.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you, like, I guess probably a pretty important question, which is like, what does fair pricing look like in a AI content marketplace? What are the factors? Obviously, it's going to be different depending on the content, the people involved in the brokering, but like again, what are the dimensions that would govern pricing?
Yeah. This is a fantastic question. I'm actually working on writing up some content around this right now because I've been doing a lot of research on this. Uh, I think there's fundamentally two factors to think about. The first is the intrinsic value of the content itself. And then the second is the particular use case of how that content's being deployed. And so, like, if you kind of break each of those apart, like at a high level, on the content side, the intrinsic value, um, there are different categories of content that we can look at. So, content that is from user generated content, like something you might find on Reddit, doesn't have the same intrinsic value as like a market research report that one of the sell side brokerage firms has put 2 years of research into, right? Like the value on a per token basis is not like dollars to dollars. So there's these different kind of categories of content, right? So you've got there's like open web content, you might have news, you might have a lifestyle, you might have books, you might have market research, market intelligence, scholarly research, right? Like there's different vertical kind of categories of content that each have there's value in each of those. And then even within that, there's difference in how you think about like front shelf content versus back shelf content, right? The stuff that is driving all the attention to your website, and then once you get them in, then you got this other stuff that you might be able to put before and keep them there.
Mhm.
So there's some metrics, and like I can get pretty deep on this if it's helpful, but like
So far, I'll let you know when we want to get back to the surface. But go, this
okay.
is great.
So there's this intrinsic value of the content itself. That is
Mhm.
one of the factors in how to think about pricing. So then if we kind of look at the second factor, which is like the use case, there's also use cases that dictate the value of that particular content. And so when I say use case, it's like, how is the AI wanting, what are they wanting to do with that content?
Right.
And the analogy kind of that I've drawn from this has come from the music industry. And so like if you go to ASCAP, you can go to their website and literally like right on the homepage, it's like, what is your use case? Like, what are you using the music for? And within that use case, you can say, oh, I have a restaurant and I want to, have music in my restaurant. So then you click on this and it shows you, it's like, well, are you a karaoke bar? Are you wanting to play it in the elevator? Are you wanting to play it as background music? Are you a music, like what is your actual use case?
Right.
And then depending on that use case, the way that they structure and price that license looks very different, right? Like it's going to cost more to if the music is much more of a focus of what you're doing versus if it's just like background music. And
Mhm.
so in AI, we can think of it very similarly to say, well, what is the use case that you're wanting to use this content for? And if you're just doing like a simple like chat, like rag chat application, like the value of that content like is probably pretty substitutable. Like, if it's just like a generic search engine. But if you're doing like a verticalized search engine,
Okay.
where now you're focusing on like as an example like open evidence, like I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but like open evidence is like pulling in all of this academic research. Now what you're doing is you're providing a use case that has a very specific audience with a very specific need and a very specific kind of outcome they're looking to drive. And so what you charge for ChatGPT at $20 a month and like what you get access to there is very different than what you charge $200 a month for like a deep research agent that's like very vertically specialized, right? And
Mm.
so you got to kind of look at these two things to say, what is the intrinsic value of the content and what is the particular use case? And that gives you an idea of like what the value is for that content, for that particular use case and how you think about pricing it.
Got it. So a lot of it matters just in terms of like the outputs. It feels like the outputs is always kind of like a big determining factor in all this.
Correct. Yep.
We talked a little bit once just over email about the agent layer for publishers, which I think is an interesting way to sort of think about all this. And what basically, I'm curious what you think about what good product strategy, I guess, looks like for a publisher as they think about that agent layer. And I know we've sort of like touched on a lot of this in terms of just clean data and et cetera. But how do you make sure it's something well designed that's going to both serve you, the people you broker with, but also the ultimate users, right? Whether they're readers or analysts or what have you.
Yeah. So is the question here just like as you think about designing, like if I'm a publisher and how I'm designing, like what am I doing from a product perspective?
Yeah,
That's
because it's like I feel like when we talk about AI, the most people default, "Oh, it's a chatbot," right?
Mhm.
Like, like I have a chatbot in front of a published site, and honestly, it's sort of like that's kind of what a lot of experiences are now from a user perspective, but, like, obviously, like, having an MCP and that data available just from a prompt that you can whether you deliberately ask for the data from this publisher or, it's just implied and it sort of gets it. I just feel like I'm not sure maybe if this is not I don't know if this is more incumbent on the publisher or the person using it, but I guess if you are the publisher, like, how are you thinking about that? And I guess it can vary widely depending on what the person's doing with it, but how do you make sure that it's all those things are available?
yeah, it's
Like, what are the top 3 things you would recommend someone to get started with before you even get in there?
yeah. Well, I think the first question is like is kind of I mean it's kind of like what is your AI strategy here?
Right,
And do you want to host your own infrastructure? And do you want to host your own content? And then the question that I have that falls behind that is like, why? like what is it you're wanting to do with it?
yeah,
But if we go back to that first question of like, what is your AI kind of strategy? Your strategy might just be we're going to license our content on a consumption basis and we're going to, deploy it through our website and use some of the kind of gateway platform infrastructure that currently exists, right? And so in that case, if that's your strategy, then a lot of that comes down to making sure that you are structuring your content in such a way that makes it easier for the agents to consume it and understand, how your content's actually structured. So you hear a lot about having there's like the HTML version that people see, and then you can have like a markdown version that people don't see. This
right.
is behind the scenes that like, that an agent might get access to through your website.
As a publisher thinks about playing in this world of AI, a lot of it has to do with defense, and that's kind of sort of trying to get not quite offense, but like if I want to have a presence in this legit, quasi marketplace or forming marketplace, what does that look like in terms of both approach and execution? That's kind of what I was thinking about. But I also, like I haven't seen too many pages for maybe these exist and I just haven't seen them, but like a page on a publisher. It's like, hey, if you're interested in like our agent and our MCP, call us or like, put in this application or et
Yeah,
cetera.
here's how you get legit access to this.
Yeah, like kind of just putting it out there. Maybe there should be more of that. I don't know. I haven't seen that. Maybe that exists. Tell me.
Well, I think it does exist. I mean, this
Yeah,
is like what Tolbit is doing. Like
sure.
anybody who's using Tolbit, like you get an MCP server by default by hooking up with them, right? Um, I think what happens on the other side of this that's a little bit challenging though is just around the discovery layer. And if you are a legit buyer who's wanting to access this content, so just as an example, there's a consulting group that we're talking to who wants again legitimate access to high quality content. They don't want to buy it through the scrapers,
Mhm.
but they have hundreds of sources of content that they're wanting to get. And so you can imagine that, you know, if they want to get it from all of the different publishers and their content, like what are they going to do? Go around to every single one of them individually and sign up for it and integrate it? Because now you've got hundreds of data processing agreements you've got to go through. You've got to make sure they're all like have information security covered. You've got to make sure that you figure out like what is the pricing going to look like. And like to your point, I don't see a lot of websites of a lot of these publishers that are saying, hey, we might have our MCP, but like, here's how our content is, here's how you get access to it, right? Like, there starts to become this kind of fan out, power scale problem here, where if you want legitimate access, like, how do you actually go about doing this? And you're right, like today as it is, there's not like an easy way to go about solving this at this time.
Yeah, it
Uh,
just seems like it's definitely a manual kind of roadblock, or at least a manual process right now that tends to be a roadblock in many cases anyway.
yeah.
This has been great. Just to wrap up, I always try to end on the same question, which is that you're projecting forward. There's got to be things you're worried about and hopeful about. Pick one from each of those columns and give it to me in any order.
I'll start with what I'm worried about. Um, I think the thing that I'm worried about is just I I worry that the kind of incumbent experience is going to be severely negatively impactful for publishers. And what I mean by this is like, I like, there's a lot of analogies and parallels we can pull from the music industry, but when Steve Jobs came out and said, we're going to sell a single track for 99 cents, and here's how the economics are going to work, and here's, how we're going to deploy it. Like, it reshaped the industry to kind of think in a different way. And it really, I think it expedited the ability to kind of adopt a new business model. And what I worry about with AI and with a lot of publishers is just, there's a lot of incumbent ways that we've done business historically. And there's not like a really clean, unified way that says, hey, this is how it works with AI. And I think what ends up happening in that instance is I think the buyers end up dictating a lot of the terms, and then publishers end up becoming price takers. And that like worries me, because I think we have an opportunity here as publishers to effectively reset the table and say, this is how we want it to work, and this is how it's going to be sustainable for us and for you going forward into the future. So that's what I worry about. What I am hopeful about is uh, we continue to see that AI needs access to fantastic content. And there's nobody better at creating that fantastic content than, publishers, as they've proven over, decades and centuries. And there's a lot of publishers who are really keen and really looking forward on trying to figure out how to do this. And so it's very encouraging to be working with some of those, to see the strides that they're taking, and how forward looking they are on this. And it gives me hope. Like, it gives me hope that, okay, if we can help to show that these use cases work and help to provide some case studies that like this is sustainable and this is a big opportunity, my hope is that it will address my worry, and it will bring the rest of the publishers along.
Nice. It's quite a vision. We'll leave it there. Jonathan, thanks so much for stopping by and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Pete, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jonathan Woahn of Cashmere. Media Copilot is a podcast, so please follow or subscribe to us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. If you're on Spotify or Apple, please leave a 5-star review and a note about what you like. And if you're on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. All those things really do help the show because they put the podcast in front of more people. Media Copilot is produced by Muso Media. Look for their link in the show notes, and don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter as well. Thanks again for being here. Be seeing you in the future.